welcome to Alive and Writing, a podcast on troubleshooting life as a writer.
I'm Shatona Havoc.
I'm April Heyman.
And I'm C.R. Rowanson. We're here.
We're alive.
And we're writing. And today we are brainstorming what and why?
Well, I need help with something. So I'm coming to you guys like I usually do to do a brainstorming session. And we've talked about why it's really important to brainstorm with others in a separate episode. So I'm going to get help from you guys and give a nice example to you, our listeners, hopefully.
Awesome.
So as I've told you guys before, this year I am actually going to be the sole writer for an interactive murder mystery taking place here in Ridgecrest. I mean, the interactive portion is taking place here in Ridgecrest, not the murder mystery. So I have a couple ideas on what I want to do, and I just want to sort of flesh some of those out with you guys and kind of get a handle on where I want to go. So,
oh, awesome.
You game?
Yep,
let's do it.
So as I'd mentioned before, I kind of had a bit of an epiphany a little while ago where all mystery stories, in my opinion, have one primary question. A lot of murder mysteries, they're called your whodunit mysteries. So there, the primary question is who. I started thinking that it would be really cool to do a mystery that focuses on one of the other classic questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So what I would like to do with you guys is I've come up with a couple basic questions that I'm just going to fire past you, and if you find one that you really like, we can then start brainstorming in that direction and just see where it goes.
Ooh, I like this.
Okay.
So the first one I have is, instead of who killed who, the question I have is what happened to this town? A little bit of extra context I had in my head that made this a lot more interesting was anthropologists and archaeologists looking back at an ancient city trying to piece together why the city died almost overnight.
Ooh. Okay.
So as I go through these other questions, if you have a little bit of extra context like that makes it way more interesting, let me know.
Okay, so what's the basic background of this plot? You said you have a general story idea?
That's the basic structure, is that it would be some archaeologists who are examining an ancient city trying to piece together why the city died abruptly and mysteriously.
Okay, so that's the specific for yours, not just in general.
That's the specific for that question of what happened to this town.
All right.
Another one I have is a when question, and that is, when did this person die? And the context there is that the death, we're not talking the death of the body. I was thinking the death of the person, which would create a different timeline where the personality, the soul, or whatever you want to go by, that died before the body actually died.
So is it kind of like a zombie?
It could be. I don't know. Could be zombies, could be ghosts, could be some other crazy stuff. I just really liked the concept of the delineation between when did the person die versus when did the body die.
Okay.
And how would someone investigate that?
I don't know, but it's going to be fun. That's part of why I need you guys.
Because this could be cool. But
so that's the when question I have. I have a couple where questions. One is, where did this thing come from?
What thing?
Anything. Could be a monster, could be
whatever killed the person. Whatever killed the town, killed the person. Is the thing with the person and the town connected, or are they totally separate? Or do we even know that at the beginning?
These are all separate primary questions that I'm pitching at you guys. And then once you find a question that really makes you perk up, I wanted to start diving more into it, coming up with other options and just brainstorming, because I don't really know what this is going to be about.
Okay.
The other one that I had that I really liked is just the question, where are we?
Where are we as in what?
As in like a group of people who are lost trying to figure out where they are. Because one of the things that I wanted to address this year is we've done this event multiple times in the past, and they've all been murder mysteries. I want to be open to doing a mystery that doesn't center around a murder.
Ooh.
So just something that's creepy, kind of has horror undertones, there can be death involved, but I want the primary question to be something else. Well, more accurately, I want the answer. I should have led with this. In the past years, the answer has always been a person. This person did this. It was done by this person this way. This year, I would like to do something where the solution is not a who.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, so with any good mystery or any mystery, I tend to start at the end and figure out what the solution is before I move, and then I move backwards.
Right, and that makes sense. I wanted to start with the primary question and see which ones got you guys interested.
Well, I like the first one.
I do
Like
too.
first
I
one?
love
I like the
that
archaeologist
first
thing.
The archaeologist one?
Yep.
one. Yeah. I my brain keeps trying to focus on the other ones you're doing, and it's not working. My brain is going, yeah, but the archaeologist.
Okay, I have one more.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Well, no, that's fine because you guys are actually picking my favorite. But the other one that I actually really liked is, why are these things happening here?
Or now.
So in that case, it becomes more about why a place is causing certain things to happen.
Okay.
Still no? Still
No, I like
okay.
the first one. Yeah.
Although that could be a sub question of your first question.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, and this is something else. I really need to do a blog post about this at some point because all of the questions have to be answered. This is just about the single driving primary question. In my mind, it's the first question that goes unanswered that only gets answered at the very end of the story. So,
Okay.
well, it sounds like you guys liked what happened to this town.
Right. I like that a lot. So, do we have a time frame?
None. So really the only limitations that I was given is that it has to tie to the area somewhat.
That was my next question.
This is being done with the local writing group here in Ridge Riders. So it needs to be tied to the area of the state or something to do with the history. So what I was thinking, and because it's me, I want to do something a little more horror intensive and a little more fantastical than we've done in the past. So what I'm thinking would be a far future type situation where it's archaeologists looking at the ruins of Ridgecrest,
Ooh, I like
trying
this.
to piece together what happened.
So, is there a reason they came to Ridgecrest in the first place?
Because of the mystery surrounding this town. So what I have in my head is it's what was it? There was a settlement on the East Coast that from the Pilgrims.
Roanoke.
Yes, where it just vanished. And there was, what is it, Croatoa that was carved in the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, where Ridgecrest died or vanished or something happened between
Sand
overnight.
magic. Oh,
No, that's a different thing entirely.
So that would be okay. So with Roanoke, the village didn't disappear; the people disappeared without a trace. But then, between the time that what was his name,
James.
Darling or Daring or
Yeah.
something like that.
Someone historic.
Someone
Yes.
historic,
Ooh, we're
because
cool.
his either daughter or granddaughter was the first person to be born in the colonies. Anyway, between the time he left to go back to England and came back, when he left, they were there. When he came back, they were gone, and they never found him.
Right. And that's the framework that I have for this. That's why now we're just kind of brainstorming for what could have happened to the city, why the people are there, how...
What are all those cow heads doing there?
Sure, something like that.
Well, I mean, come on. Ridgecrest was originally Crumville, named after Mr. Crumb, who was a dairy farmer in the desert.
That is
Okay.
the weirdest thing I've heard all day. You know that, right?
You didn't know that?
Nope.
Crumville. This used to be Crumville.
Well, I knew that. I just didn't know he was a dairy farmer
I know, a dairy farmer in the desert.
in the desert.
Hey, we are a living oxymoron. You might want to work that into your mystery. Just saying.
I kind of like that. Actually, I do, because it's like this juxtaposition of the absurd and the reality of life.
Well, and
Okay.
and the Sidewinder missiles, with this cow heads
Okay.
or skulls.
So-
Skulls. That's the word I'm looking
So
for.
somehow tying in the origins of all of this.
Yeah, just as a red herring or a white.
It was the
Still in here.
chupacabra. The chupacabra.
On that note, kind of like what I was saying, I don't want the solution to this to be a who. In the past,
That's right.
yeah, well, no, so chupacabra, that might be an option. The past couple times we've done this, we have woven in pieces to make it seem supernatural, but in the end it was just people, and I'm a fantasy horror writer and do all sorts of stuff. I enjoy the creepy monsters, so I'm always a little sad when it turns out that it was just a person playing on superstitions of others.
Well, what if it's something that influenced all the people to do something? Okay, so not to riff off of Stephen King, but didn't he have a story where the town had to decide if they were going to let one child live, they were going to let the child go, become some kind of evil monster, or the option was everybody had to die. And so originally, the time it happened before, the town chose to die. And then this time they chose to let the child go.
I am not real familiar with Stephen King. I'm sure this will get me some hate mail. Stephen King is not one of my favorite authors.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I've just
I like
lost
some
one
of
of
his
my
stuff.
best friends just for saying that. Sorry, Michelle.
So, no, I remember they made it, I didn't read the book because they made it into a TV miniseries. So I watched the TV miniseries and it was actually pretty good. But what I like is that it talks about the group of people had to make a decision.
Okay.
And so it's not so much, I mean, you still have that supernatural horror vibe where something outside came in and terrified them. And then the people, I mean, it really comes down to a question of morality and, do you do this or that?
Well, and that's a really good point because you had mentioned before wanting to start at the end.
Yes.
So the end of the story that the archaeologists are learning about is a tragedy. I want the story to end with the good guys losing and everybody either dying or being close to dead. Like, they have lost, and that is why the town vanished, emptied, or what have you.
Okay, does the archaeologist coming back reopen that and just
Yes.
and make it so they find out what happens, but by doing so, they've brought the same doom upon themselves?
In terms of a story, that's exactly what I have planned. Is I want whatever the mystery to be framed by the arrival of the archaeologists. So, and this is me trying to be tricky, play the audience, and hopefully get them following me online on my website, is they're going to be solving the mystery of the town right along with the archaeologists. That's going to be the interactive portion of this event. Once the mystery has been solved, I want to give them a little bit of extra information that shows them that by showing up, the archaeologists are now in danger.
So,
But that's just me being a jerk.
no,
And-
I like that because think about it. At the very end of this, you've got a winner. Someone has solved this, right?
Right.
And then this could be where you do like the other type of murder mystery thing, where you've got your actors. So you just have one actor archaeologist guy walk in and say, "Fellows, like pretend he's talking to the others who we're not actually seeing." But
I was probably going to hand out an extra piece of documentation, an extra piece of writing, to be like, congratulations, so-and-so won. Now I want you all to read this. So why don't we focus on the end of the tragedy, not the end of
So
what
what
happens
did
to
it?
the archaeologists. Let's focus on what happened to the town. What sort of crazy stuff can we come up with for that?
okay, so this town, and this is Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest has the Navy base here. We have explosions. We have fighter jets. We've created the Tomahawk, the Sidewinder, and what other missile? Harm.
bunch.
The Harm.
A bunch.
Yeah, we are the missile central here.
Yeah, but don't forget, we're out in the desert. We're right next to Death Valley, and we have all sorts of earthquake lines going through the area.
What if we came up with a new reason why it was called Death Valley?
Well, remember the old sign? I don't know if you lived here then, but it used to be, the Ridgecrest sign when you come around that corner coming into town, there's like, welcome to Ridgecrest. Well, it used to say Ridgecrest, gateway to Death Valley. And the teenagers would go out there and spray paint over the valley.
Right, welcome to death.
So, I mean, can you imagine what we could do with that?
Oh man. So yeah, I just want it to be something definitely it doesn't have to be supernatural, but I want it to be non-human. So some of the areas my brain had been going is it could be some sort of folklore monster from Native Americans of this region.
Ooh.
I could try and
that
find
could be
something
cool.
about that.
We got the petroglyphs. Any odd? I mean, can you imagine?
It could be something made up if I wanted to do something more. I'm not thinking of the right term. Kind of like 28 Days Later. I mean, you could make it claim that the base was doing like biological research, or I don't know.
That's where I was going. You know, not even intentional though.
Kind of like Stranger Things, where there's something that has been released and that's been causing problems. You know. So I don't know what other kind of stuff can we do.
You can totally go like Doctor Who and end up with like plastic arms attacking you, or.
That makes my brain happy.
I mean, think of all the, but I mean, in that vein, think of all the alien forms that were so different that could be really bizarre. Like my daughter always wanted those big giant tower lines to be actually benevolent aliens in Doctor Who. She, the big giant look like Eiffel Towers, the arms. She always wanted them to be benevolent aliens. And so, I mean, but surely there's some sort of, if you wanted to go alien route.
And then there's also the option, I don't know if either of you have seen The Crazies.
No, I vaguely know what you're talking about, though.
There's a contaminated water supply that has some sort of pathogen in it, and the people start going insane and killing each other.
Well, there's all the rumors around here about the base dumping all kinds of stuff from the airplanes, and it ended up in our water table. So you've got definitely...
I mean, that's certainly an option.
With everybody in this town with our allergies?
I kind of pride myself in being able to make a lot of things creepy. In fact, right now I'm trying to work on how I can do a short story where the creepy part will be when the main character steals a piece of bubble gum.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a children's story, by the way.
Oh, no, it's not.
Okay, never mind. I kind of like, okay, so Shatona said something about peaceful aliens. What if it is an alien and they are peaceful, and to help us, they have, for some reason, taken the people because that was the only way to keep the peace.
So mass alien abduction, kind of?
Or death, one or the other.
Oh,
They made us into dust because...
My brain was going the other way. My brain was going, "Are you my mummy?" Where they're trying to help and they create a problem.
I like that.
You know what I mean?
That actually works. So that works in so many ways really well with this area too.
Right?
Yeah,
it really does.
Ooh.
And we aren't that far from Nevada.
What if the people didn't disappear? What if they're still here, but they've turned into something else?
I like that too.
Ooh, I do too. And they work together.
Well, I mean,
Ooh,
we live...
I like that too.
Yeah, so, okay.
Okay, the creosote rings. Okay, so for people who don't know, we have a bush out here called creosote. And some of the really large creosote can be hundreds and hundreds of years old. And as they get bigger, they're called a king creosote, right?
Really?
And so the inside is totally bare, but the outside's a complete ring. Yes. So what if there's rings and rings and rings, and it just happens to be where...
Crop circles, creosote circles.
It's creosote circles instead of crop circles, and it's the people because the aliens have thinking that they're helping didn't, or it doesn't even have to be aliens. It could be the base working with nanites, and the nanites think something's horribly wrong.
Or anything. I mean, I hope that most of our listeners are familiar with Serenity and Firefly. I hope. If you're not, you should go watch those right now.
Yes, they're very good.
Turn this off. Go watch. No, wait a minute. I didn't say that.
Oh no, please do. You can come back to this.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, turn it off. Go watch it.
Because I don't want to spoil it, but there's something similar. I like the idea, whether it was aliens or the base or even just an industry that popped up. So this is far future, right? So there could be another industry.
They're always trying to bring new industry here.
That pops up here that nobody wanted to do anywhere else.
Glow sticks were invented here.
That's true.
Yes, they were.
So, see?
Pistachio farming. I'm just saying.
I'm liking the idea. I mean...
No one wants the pistachio farms here.
Get the little green men.
We got little green nuts.
Oh, boy. Help us. We're nuts. But I kind of like the idea. So part of the reason that the Navy base is out here is because some of the testing they do, they aren't allowed to do near population centers.
Shocker.
So I kind of like the idea of another option being a new industry that forms up that people don't want near cities. So I really like the idea of that secondary industry coming in, and that can be biotech, nanites, anything like that. Or I'm not going to throw out aliens or some supernatural rights, but I really like that idea of it. Initially, it was supposed to be something helpful that went horribly, horribly wrong.
Yes. Well, and it fits for the weekend. I mean, come on, this is Halloween weekend, right?
It's going to be in September.
No, I thought it was always by Halloween. Huh, that's so sad.
It's just called Weird Weekend.
Yeah.
So everything is weird that weekend.
Yeah, and Clark, they picked the right guy.
Okay, so I really like that. So something changed the populace.
Yeah.
Which, that is great, because it lets me, as far as mystery stuff goes, a lot of what I've learned, I've got to work closely with Daniel Stallings, who's a local mystery author and is also the force behind Master Mystery Productions.
Awesome.
And I've learned a lot working with him. One of the things is it's great when you can have multiple believable options. Since this is going to be supernatural and stuff and out there, I can totally have a number of options of, we think this is a cult, we think that maybe this was aliens. Like, it's one of those weird things. It depends on who's on the team of archaeologists.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah, like personal biases do lovely things.
Right. So I like that because it's
red herrings.
Yeah, and the fact that the populace is changing, I can also throw in flavors of your monster movies and your monster stories without
superheroes gone wrong.
What if the industry that comes in is actually a health industry and they're trying to make people better?
Okay.
Better how? As in improved personal bodies?
So that's a classic gene mod type story, which we could work with.
So what if it made, because we're next to the base, we've got NASA out here too. What if it's not so much make people better, but people adaptable to their environments? Because NASA is moving into space and they're trying to find a way to get people to live better on other planets.
That I really like.
Yeah.
But instead, we adapted to our own environment, ended up becoming creosote bushes.
That is so awesome.
That I really like. And now, so to you, our listener, I do want to point out that if you are very familiar with horror and sci-fi, a lot of this stuff may not sound mind-shattering, like earth-shattering new material.
Oh, no.
And it's not. And sorry, this is just me throwing in a little bit of my 2 cents about stuff in general. Is most of your ideas are not going to be that original on the surface. It's then finding all the ways to tweak it, and then me throwing in my special flavor to do those creepy little monsters that I so love.
You are in a limited venue. This isn't a novel. You don't have hours and hours and hours of reading to get this through and done. This is only a couple of hours of people's time that they, you know what I mean? So you have to limit yourself in a way that if this was a book, you wouldn't have to.
So working off of something they're familiar with is actually helpful in this case.
Yeah.
Also remember, there are no news stories, but given the same basic premise, the three of us could come up with 3 totally different takes on it. And they would all be interesting because we're awesome writers.
So with that, something I just realized.
And humble, too.
Yes, so humble. We are the most humble. In fact, we win.
And we're proud of it.
So what it is that I like about this is the mystery, again, instead of it being who, what, or how, like the biotech or the cult stuff, that's all like the how questions. For this type of venue, I could actually leave some of that up in the air. The question that will determine the winner of this event is who can correctly determine what has happened to the people.
Yes. And come on, they turned into a creosote bush. Who's going to guess that?
Or some sort of creosote bush monster or something horrible and creepy like that, because it's what I like to do. But
I'll sneak up behind somebody and tickle them with a branch.
But that's fun to me because I can leave a lot of those options open, because the actual important part is identifying what happened so that when I pull them in and switch to the story of the archaeologist, they are all properly keyed up and petrified whenever the archaeologist walks out of their tent and there's a new creosote bush that wasn't there before.
Well, you don't want to make it too much like Triffids, though.
What's that?
I'm not familiar with that either.
You've never heard of Triffids?
No.
I think we just broke April's heart.
Yes, you did, just a little bit.
I
The
see a
ultimate
tear.
science fiction horror film. You've never seen Triffids? The premise is we get alien life forms come and take over the planet, and they are like they're a tripod, and they have an eye at the top. And everybody's blind because when they came in, the way the aliens entered the atmosphere blinded everyone, unless you were inside or something like that. Anyway, people got blinded. So the Triffids, they don't make any sound. So when they come up, they eat people. So when it was easy to eat people because we couldn't see them coming.
And they're silent.
So it's all about the people who survived and figured out how to kill the Triffids because nothing killed them. You could hack at them, you could blow them apart. It just never worked. But eventually they did figure it out.
Okay, now I have to see this just so that I can
Me
figure. Or is it a
too.
book? Is it a movie or a book?
It's both, actually.
Okay, I'll probably watch.
I
the
thought
movie.
the British version was really good.
I hope it's
Okay.
on Netflix.
It might be, I don't know.
But
YouTube.
okay.
As we pause to go find out.
But I really, really like that. I like the idea of most of the population turning into monsters. Not all of them, because I want to have some body so that I can show you the horrible, terrible ways that I've mangled the populace of my town.
There's only so many ways you can upset the people here. Who do we offend first?
Desiccate everybody. And
Equal opportunity.
Good times. Yeah,
people jerky,
I'm not.
people jerky.
I'm not
Wait a minute,
picky.
we're all jerks. What are we talking about?
Equal treatment for all.
That's right.
Oh, there's that new marijuana shop in Johannesburg that is called
I'm not doing pot monsters.
no, it's called High Weed 395.
I'm also not doing crazy. I'm not doing crazy stoners with extreme munchies. I'm not doing that either. I do have some standards.
Surely there's got to be a way to have him survive because he was too stoned out.
I'm just. I say that, but now I feel like I need to do a zombie story that started from a new strain of cannabis.
So how far-fetched is that? I mean, it's just not.
Oh goodness! All right.
All right.
So
Okay,
where
okay.
were we?
All
Back
right,
on
so
track.
Back to what happened to the people.
Yeah,
They
so we-
became creosote.
Or
Well, maybe
something
not,
Like that.
something like
I'm gonna
that.
have to do research. I really like the idea of that, of it being some sort of central organism that they became connected at the very least. Because in a way, I mean, humans are social creatures, but this is what I like doing, and I want to keep this on brainstorming about the plot, not brainstorming the monsters, because
Oh,
well. If you want to do that, we can certainly do that another time. If either of you ever need monsters, I
He's got lots of them.
Yep.
All right, so what else do you need us to do?
Okay, so we have an answer to the main question. The main question was what happened to this town, and it was that they got turned into monsters, killed each other, probably adapted to their environment in some sort of weird, creepy, horrifying way. So then we need to backtrack a little bit. We have a whole bunch of options as to why this happened.
okay.
And
So,
I guess the other thing that I need to figure out is what type of evidence the
oh yeah.
archaeologists would uncover. So yeah, kind of like a classic murder mystery. We know who killed who. I have a whole bunch of options as to why and how.
Right.
For me, I usually have to start thinking, maybe I don't necessarily want to decide on the why and how just yet, but so maybe if we brainstorm on those a little bit more.
Okay, so the why, well,
Well, we did do the
I
why.
was gonna say, because if the why was actually a misguided benevolence,
It was trying to help people in some way,
right, and they failed.
Horribly.
or succeeded terribly.
Either way,
That's a good way to look at it.
I like I really do like the terrible success there.
Okay, so we have that type of thing coming in.
Okay, so when we say the town disappeared, does that include the people who created the problem in the first place? Or did they realize what they were doing and leave?
That's an excellent question.
So okay, so we have to figure out what happened to the people or whatever. So if it was a monster that came in, it would have to leave some kind of evidence of its passing or where it came from, right?
Right.
But if it's a company, wouldn't they have to do the same thing? I mean, there's a building maybe where they were at, but it looks like people left. Whereas in town, it may just look like dinner's still on the table or the cars are in the middle of the street, that kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas the building...
Okay, wait a minute.
Okay.
Now we're getting into Left Behind. Come on, don't do this to me.
No.
Well, no, that's fine. This is another interesting thing of...
Because that would have been around the world, and this is just one specific area.
And this is identifying why it was so mysterious. So this is another good question to answer. What was it about the situation that was so creepy that these people wanted to come investigate and answer this mystery?
Oh, good point. Or did they know about it? Did someone stumble across it, or what?
So, like, for example, with what was the town again?
Roanoke.
Roanoke, they had Croatoa. So, what would be the Croatoa of Ridgecrest? Like, what is the thing that was so weird that people have been talking about it for like maybe centuries, depending on how I want to write it, for these people to finally come back with all of their advanced technology?
Okay, I just had I don't know what we could do with it, but I just had a thought. Out at Echo Range. Have you ever been out to Echo Range?
No.
Okay, one of the ranges out there, Echo Range, has what they call Seasight, and what it is from the air, it looks like a battleship. It's just a land formation. It looks like a battleship, so they use it for their testing with the planes and whatnot. But if something weird about that, and everybody knows about it, right? Because I mean, come on, you can find that on Google. But what if something weird happened to Seaside? That.
Yeah, but that would take them out to Seaside, not stay in town.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, okay, so here's another idea. Over in Death Valley, they have the moving rocks.
I am not familiar with that.
Okay, so in Death Valley, they have an area where it appears that the rocks move.
Go on.
Okay, and scientists have been studying it for a really long time. They have some theories as to why it moves, but they're not sure why. But it looks like the rocks actually will move several inches or centimeters, inches a year, and it has something to do with the ground shifting or whatever. But whatever you have here, you could do something very similar to that.
So that's the shifting, whispering sand song is real.
It might be.
So this brings up another interesting question, and that's a matter of time scale, of timeline. Because depending on how fast these changes take effect would change what happened.
Right.
If it was something that happened over a week, was Ridgecrest quarantined? Did it happen so spontaneous? Did they just drop out of communication from all people, and anybody who showed up never came back? What happened historically? So, now,
okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, because if you think about something, if something happened over a long period of time, people tend to adapt to that kind of stuff. So it would have to be rather sudden, don't you think?
Right.
I think so.
But with Roanoke, they are very isolated. The town. Okay, so Ridgecrest is kind of isolated. We're
really
pretty isolated.
Uh-huh.
But so the town is small. It was isolated, but was within a certain area, and he leaves and he comes back. Everybody in the area is gone. So, and that's always been the mystery because, and it was so famous was because it was one of the first colonies in the United States. So,
I just had an idea because I'm really enjoying the idea of doing this supernatural sci-fi, like supernatural horror monster sci-fi blend. I'm really having fun with that in my head because it's a terrible place to live. But what I'm liking the idea of is what if in history there was evolved electronic warfare or even nuclear warfare where there was some sort of EMP or even just a natural disaster that knocked out communication for this part of the West Coast.
well, we could have, or it was the big one, and they had the major earthquake they've been expecting for years and years.
Something that just knocked us out of communication long enough that when they finally got everything back up, nobody could reach anybody in Ridgecrest.
Okay, so the only problem I see with that is because it's a Navy base and they're constantly in communication with everything else. I mean, this is kind of a...
Which is why it would have to be a really big thing.
So
Okay,
a
well,
really,
wait a
really
minute.
big earthquake like the one they had in San Francisco, if you place that down here in like LA instead.
Do you guys remember when the entire grid went out on the West Coast 15 years ago maybe? Well, you wouldn't remember, but April, were you here?
Yes, it was. I remember
Do you
that.
remember that? Okay.
It was several days.
Do you remember what the base had? What kind of, how it affected the base? Because yes, they would have generators, but that's a lot of generator.
Yeah, but the base has got the solar fields now,
Oh,
so they
yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
They don't
Okay.
need generators, so they can live off the grid.
So that
Okay.
could be part of what makes it creepy.
That's what I was just
So-
about to
because
say.
It's not depending. It's
Exactly,
not
because
dependent
we
on it.
shouldn't be knocked out, so why are we?
And that can be part of the whole monster vibe.
They can't get here.
Here's the other thing. No, the base was self-sufficient, but it was cut off enough and under attack from what happened to the people of Ridgecrest.
It can be more than one problem.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
One creating another, creating another.
So whatever natural disaster has cut us off, we're pretty much, most people out here know that's going to happen at some point because we're just so isolated. So most people are ready for it. But okay, so we're cut off, but the natural disaster has let something loose or done something on base to whatever they've done horribly. And then if you've had this other industry that's come in and has at the same time, either just before or just after, maybe they think they're helping people by widespread distribution of their miracle drug or their whatever. I mean, it's like a perfect storm. So you have maybe more than one, I don't want to call it a deus ex machina, where the monster comes in at the end and just eats everybody, just as they discover that, well, the people disappeared really because they got turned into creosotes, and then you have like this lizard monster that comes out and eats everyone.
And this is part of what. Okay, so kind of back to what I was saying before is we need to examine the tragedy that happened to Ridgecrest. So
Yeah.
now we're looking at a different story. The frame story is the archaeologist.
Right.
And that's something that I'll be able to piece together working with Master Mystery Productions to make that truly interactive. But I think right now we need to brainstorm the tragedy of Ridgecrest.
Well, I think that it can be just like it was in Roanoke. The tragedy is that this community disappeared overnight,
Right.
and that doesn't happen
Do we need to know what caused it?
because
I
Roanoke
need
you
to
never
know.
find out.
I mean, I need to
Well,
know.
wait a minute, but that's the point. The point is what happened. Wait, isn't that the question you're asking
Yeah.
him? So
Yeah.
we have to know, or nobody can win,
Now-
and that's no fun.
The players aren't going to need to know all of the details that made it happen.
Right.
So they won't need to know that the earthquake shut down the power and that this did this and this did this. They don't necessarily need to know all of that. But I feel like I do.
But think about it. Wait a minute. Wait. Okay. They have been saying for years. They've been. We had the Oroville Dam issue recently.
Right.
They've been saying for years that this would be a problem if this failed, and we had this, and we would have this big flood, and it almost happened. they set all this stuff in motion to have these fail safes, right? So the base has their generators, they have their solar fields, they have all this stuff that is set up to prevent this problem. What if it doesn't work?
Okay.
I mean, everything always works, right? We set up these things. This is a high-tech area, so of course it's going to work. But so many times we put all our confidence in this technology, and then it fails us.
So there are two things that I'm seeing. Is we need a way that the town is cut off, and we need a way that the base is cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one for the base has to be a little bit more drastic because they have things in place that the town doesn't. They have to because
it's
because it's
U.S. military.
It's the U.S. military. So it's not just the solar panels for power. It's the internet. It's the phone lines. All that has to be cut off at once.
Which is total alien. Okay, well, one thing I wanted to point out is, spotlight here, but one thing I wanted to point out is for brainstorming by yourself, one of the really cool ways to do that is to use K.M. Weiland's Outlining Your Novel workbook. That thing is awesome. When I first read the actual book, I didn't think I outlined because I just wrote everything by the seat of my pants, but that one, I actually... I went through it and I answered every single question about an idea I just come up with. And I realized I outlined in my head. So I took every question in that stupid thing and I put them in an Excel worksheet. And then Katie, being the wonderful gal she is, created an actual workbook. And you go through those questions. That is a brainstorming a session in and of itself. So definitely check out K.M. Weiland's. We'll have it in the... link down there.
Show notes.
That's the thing. Show notes. Thanks, April.
You're welcome.
Okay, you know what I mean? What if the alien presence coming in acts like that electromagnetic pulse? Have you read Terry Blackstock's First Light, Last Light, whatever?
I have
all the lights. Where that's exactly what happens. A major electromagnetic pulse hits the possibly world, but definitely the U.S. People have lost everything. Planes fall out of skies. Everything happens. It is not left behind where all these people are gone. People are there. They just have no way of using anything because it's stripped us of our technology.
So S.M. Sterling did something very similar in Dies the Fire, where there's an electronic pulse that not only goes around the world and kills all electrical, afterwards they can't get it back. So even striking flint won't produce fire. Steam doesn't produce energy.
Whoa.
Yeah, so all physics is screwed.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
Yes, it's a pretty good series. But we have the geothermals up here.
Yeah. So something else that I realize, and I think this is the direction that we're going to want to go, is we can cut the town off. Because everything on base needs to be operated by people.
Yes, that's true.
And those people live in town, not on base.
We do have some people who live on town, or on base, but...
very few.
What I'm thinking is this all sounds like this can't be a drawn-out thing that happens over months.
No.
It wouldn't work. But it could happen over a couple of days. Especially if at first nothing seems wrong. And then as it's kind of like a disease where by the time you see the symptoms, it's all spreading so fast that you can't really stop it.
Right.
So if one of the symptoms, no idea what, if everybody was infected by the time they figured out what was going on and afflicted in such a way that they wouldn't use any supplies on the base to go for help.
Because they can't, because if they do, they'll spread it themselves.
Because they'll spread it, that blends with the epidemic, or maybe their brains have been altered and like they're having a hard time thinking of how to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of it attacking the people because then part of the mystery is they get back to town and the town has power back because the state has power back. And the base has power. And when they look at logs, the base never went out of power because all of the fail-safes functioned perfectly. Everybody's just gone.
Right. And if
Yeah.
you're transformed in some way, that would make sense.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
I do too.
You just have to figure out how they transformed and why they transformed, I think.
Yes.
And
Yes.
whatever caused the event that kicked it off.
So I'm liking the industry idea. I'm really, really liking the industry idea. Some other sort of industry comes into town. It could be tied with NASA, like you said, the whole adaptation to space. I love that.
I do too.
So it could be that they have reservoirs of materials that are not many places here have basements.
No.
No, they do not. There's a few,
There's
but
a
not
few houses,
many.
and McDonald's does.
Part of it is because it's really hard to dig in this soil. But if I wanted to do the whole
Kalichi came to get us back from drilling through it. That's it. I'm telling you. My husband hates that stuff with a passion.
What I'm thinking is if there was a massive earthquake, if something spilled and broke into the groundwater, a lot of the water in these regions come from ground wells.
Yes.
So the interesting thing about our water is that we have a high level of arsenic.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Heavy metals are kind of high in our area because the water levels have been so low. So they have to work harder to separate out the dirt. They have to filter it, and they don't get all of it. I get a notice maybe once or twice a year about my arsenic levels.
Really?
Yes, and so if you live here for any length of time, you're going to have those heavy metals still in your body. They never leave.
Right.
So maybe the people who are affected most are those who live here longest.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then, but
So the
eventually,
children.
would be the last to go, probably.
Okay, and this could work well because if it's something they have been testing for some sort, maybe it's been they've been testing for plants, and that it's been something that they've been dispersing wide across the region. It's been seeping into the groundwater. It has been building up in our systems, kind of like the heavy metals do. Then the earthquake happens. Our filtration stuff is going to get shut off. And another compound, I mean, we're talking really loose science terms here, and, science, whatever. Something else gets into the water that then activates the change in people who have enough buildup of the previous compound.
Right. That would work.
Because then the earthquake would trigger it. It wouldn't be everybody, which means I could have that horror feel vibe as people are examining. The only people that the only bodies they can find were horribly mutilated. Everybody else is gone.
You could even have two problems where there's the problem with the groundwater, and then there's an external problem with the company, like having experimenting on the people without their.
That's what I'm thinking.
And so you have two, and the people, one of them isn't gone, they've just gone dormant because there's no one there to eat or attack or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be.
Oh. Okay, so this is starting to get really, really fun in my head.
Okay, but I have one caution.
What's that?
I know. I'm going to be the spoil sport here, but you were talking about this interactive murder mystery thing. If you get it too complicated, if you get too many variables, you need variables, but if you get too many, you're going to make it impossible for people to solve in the amount of time that you are allowed to give them.
And that is absolutely right. That is
Which
absolutely right.
stinks.
It's true, but now that I have a solid idea of what happened, and what's frustrating me right now is the story we are coming up with is way more interesting. And so now I want to write this as a story.
I was just
going to
say, I think you should novelize it. I really
Actually,
do.
I think it would make an excellent short story.
That was my original plan, is I wanted to, like I said, I wanted it to end with the audience realizing that the archaeologists were in danger. So really, the audience would get up to the midpoint in the plot, because the midpoint is where everything starts going wrong for the archaeologists. So then they know what happened before, but then they have to come read my short story to see the horrible twisted end.
I like it.
They
No,
can do
really,
that.
that's awesome.
Another idea that I was having was because we have a bunch of geothermal I don't know what to call it.
Springs
or whatever,
springs,
right?
Underground springs.
So instead of going that route where it's mostly human, what if you have something that lives in the geothermal underneath, and because of the earthquake it's woken up, and because there's
Steam ghost monsters.
something like that, where it's just because we have a bunch of cracks in the ground here.
Oh, come on, we have
So-
earthquakes every day. You know this, right?
So
every single day we
It
have
can
earthquakes.
literally rise up and do whatever.
I wish you could see Clark's grin.
Yeah,
I
for those
mean,
not benefiting from the video feed, I am just grinning ear to ear.
this is Clark's, like, yeah.
So we're kind of getting a situation where it is a perfect storm of all of these things that just came together to make it all go wrong. Now, I don't know how many of these ideas I'll be able to get away with, because as you pointed out, Shotona, I'm limited in what we can do with the murder mystery. I will still be limited in what I can do in a short story, even what I can do in a novel. But
Not as limited.
not as limited, but we have tons and tons of really awesome ideas that I can play with.
Right.
We do actually meet frequently to help narrow those ideas down once he's kind of taken these big picture ideas and kind of figured out where he wants to put them within the story.
Yeah, and if you guys really liked this episode, I would like to do more of these in the future, maybe one a season, and we can start doing some stuff like that. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing a brainstorming session to help April with a magic system, because
Yeah.
magic systems are my crack,
It's going to be awesome.
along with terrifying monsters.
And I need
dabble.
help.
Terrifying monsters who create magic systems would be, I mean,
Ooh,
There's an idea.
yes, that is.
There is literally not enough years in our lives to be able to write all the stories
Oh,
we
no.
come up with.
it's
No
the only
way.
reason I go to the gym, so maybe my brain will stay alive a little longer.
Okay, so we have a lot of really, really good stuff here. And the next stage that I'm going to have to do with this is I'm going to have to go to Master Mystery Productions and Ridge Riders and make sure that they're okay with the creepy, terrible things that I want to do to our attendees.
For Weird Weekend. Yes,
For
they
Weird
better
Weekend.
be. We got 2 votes here. Do I need to join so that I can have a vote?
And from there, just to give you kind of a picture of how this is going to go, that's where I'm going to start working down to tailor it more for an interactive setting. But this has been extremely helpful to me. So thank you guys. Like, I have lots of ideas to
This
go
is
with
my
here.
favorite. I love this stuff.
Yeah, this is fun, and we would probably go on for hours. But for right now, we want you to go brainstorm an idea. Maybe it's a scene in your current novel. Maybe it's a new story that you want to work on. Whatever it is, go ahead and brainstorm with either yourself or get a group together, preferably, and just bounce ideas off of each other. And when you're done, why don't you post down in the comments how it went and what you came up with?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. So, this has been Alive in Writing, because sometimes that's all you have, but it's all you really need. Take care.